Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're listening. This is Overcome Out Loud with Charlie Smith. This is where I get to sit down with real people that have overcome real obstacles in their lives to give you hope and real solutions. And this morning, or this afternoon, wherever you're listening, is actually a really special episode. It's really the first time over the course of the last 15 or so episodes that I've done where I get to sit down with a truly inspirational man who can really help us learn some new tools for overcoming really any obstacle in our lives. We've met people that have overcome addiction. We've met people that have overcome eating disorders and diagnosis with medical conditions, and all of them have a formula. And today, my guest is none other than Travis Thomas. Let me introduce you to Travis. Travis is a author. He is a leadership training expert. He is a coach for many organizations, including the U.S. men's national soccer team. Got his roots in improv a long time ago and developed a platform around the three words live, yes, and. He is a very special person to me, and I want to introduce you to Travis Thomas. Travis, welcome.
Charlie, thank you so much. Again, really honored to be here. And I love Overcome Out Loud, the podcast, all the work that you're doing. So super honored to be in that company.
Yeah, it's amazing. And Travis is one of those gentlemen in my life who I've never physically met. The first time I heard him was on a webinar with Limitless Minds and Trevor Moad, who we're both close with. Trevor's much more of an indirect mentor to me. And through the course of that webinar, there were some topics that I really, really was inspired by. And I kind of hit the guys up on the webinar, and next thing I know, I'm on the phone with Travis, and we've remained in contact ever since. And he lives an amazing life. And I'm really excited to share his philosophy of living with you all this morning. So Travis, I know you got your roots in improv, and it's amazing how that early passion of yours turned into this life you have today, and we'll talk about that. But tell me a little bit about kind of age of young 20s and your interest in actually getting into the world of improv as a start to all this.
Yeah, that's great. I think like most things in life, what the reason we get into something, it ends up changing and becoming something different. And improv for me was definitely that. I grew up in Flint, Michigan, and so grew up playing sports my whole life. Flint is a big sports town, and so sports were my first passion. My dad had a family business in the town, and so I grew up also with that influence of being a very sort of kind of civic minded a participant in the community and knowing the impact that has. But yeah, so growing up in the Midwest and playing a lot of sports, I went to college. Soccer was my passion, so I played soccer in college. But graduated. I met my wife at school, and so she and I were babies when we got married. We're not babies anymore, but we were babies when we got married, and then we started our sort of our life adventure together, and that started in Michigan for a couple of years, and then we went to St. Louis for a year, and then we found ourselves in Boston, both with kind of professional corporate jobs, but being young, no kids, living in Boston, and just having a great time enjoying the city. And I had grown up loving comedy. Comedy was just super important to me. I did a little stand-up comedy in college. When I say a little, I think I did it twice on campus sort of competitions. But it was always enthralled with comedy and specifically improvisation, but never had a chance to do it or learn it. There was a group on campus, but they were the theater kids, and I was an athlete, so it didn't mix. And so here we are living in Boston. I'm probably 25 at the time, 24, 25. And we went to an improv theater that had just opened a few months previous. And it was our first weekend there. We saw the show, and I'm just blown away the entire time. Like, there's 6 people on stage. They're taking audience suggestions, and they're just turning it into like magic on stage. It really is, to me, like improv done well is like magic on stage. And I just remember walking out thinking not I need to become a professional performer, but I need to know how they do that. How do what skill set allows them to do that? And so I called and hey, do you guys have classes? Do you have a training center? And they're like, yeah, we got this whole training center. I'm like, can I do it? And they're like, sure. So I signed up for class, and come to find out they were such a young theater. I was in the first, ever training center class at level 1, and ended up staying in it all the way through level 6 and graduating. but like from class one, I was hooked. And I wasn't thinking like, oh, I'm gonna turn this into a career 20 plus years down the road. I was just like, this is so cool. And it has such huge implications to my life. But I just loved it. It was fun. And but really quickly, here I am, I'm newly married, I'm working in a corporate environment, and I have this, sports as a background, and I'm looking at all these different aspects of my life through this lens, this new lens of improvisation and the principles that go into it. And it was just like one of those transformational moments in your life where you just start looking at things differently. And that was the beginning of it. And I just so happened, I graduate from the training center. I'm able to audition and make their touring company, where you just kind of, you augmented the main stage cast and you did private shows and college shows in the area. And then I kind of, over the next couple of years, worked my way up the ladder and was eventually performing on the main stage with with those stars that, I saw, the first time I saw a show, and was just loving it, and did that for about 4 years. And then my wife and I moved to Florida after our first child around 2003, 2004. And I found two guys down here with improv backgrounds, and we started a group down here in South Florida, the three of us. And even though all three of us have gone in different directions, there's always been two of us in town. And so we've been performing ever since 2004. So here we are, 2021. The fact that we've been performing for that long, and I've been doing improv for this long, has been crazy. But through that journey of time, I went from, this is something that's fun, to becoming a performer, to being a part-time performer, and realizing that I think I can take these ideas and share them with the world in a bigger way. And that's really what the journey has looked like, Charlie, for the last 15, 16 years.
Wow. I mean, first of all, amazing. Second of all, I think one of the early lessons that I hear when I listen to that story from you is the importance of believing in the start of our journey. I mean, if you were to see yourself, as a young man in Boston who wanted to go do some improv and learn about it, and you were curious and you signed up for that first class, that would lead you to becoming being able to marry that passion of sports and loving sports with that improv. I mean, it didn't dawn on you then, but I think we all need to understand that, the man on top of the mountain does not get dropped off on a helicopter, right? I mean, there's this path, this journey we take, but it all
Yeah.
starts with our intention. And I just love how, your commitment to improv early on led you to this life. It's like when I hear people get out of school with a degree in kinesiology, it's like, the job as the head trainer for the Lakers is taken, but you might be able to just start training one person. And I've seen
Mhm.
people just follow their passion and lead to amazing places. And that's what I think is so inspiring about where you took this. And when you talk about the principles of improv, because I know your platform is Live Yes And, can you maybe share, because I know that's the embodiment of your foundational training. Can you talk a little bit about where that principle came from and how that was so important to improv and what that actually means?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, and so obviously my company is called Live Yes And, but the two words yes and themselves are foundational to all of improvisation. So no matter who you are, if you've taken any improvisation class at any point, the first thing you learn is yes and. And even the roots of where that came from, I've tried to do some historical research on it, and there's no one person that is coined with, this is the first person that said yes and. So everyone just kind of agrees like, hey, we know it's the foundation of improvisation. We don't know who is the first person, but hey, it just is. And so it is that foundation. Even anyone with acting experience, right? Improvisation is a part of learning acting, and so everyone understands this concept of yes and. And really, Charlie, so it reinforces this idea for me, is that each and every one of us are improvisers.
Hmm,
We just are. Every single one of us
right.
is improvising our way through life. We just think that we're not, because A, we're not standing on a stage and doing it for laughs, or B, we're thinking like, well, I'm not improvising. I know what's going to happen today, or I know what I think is going to happen today, which is even comical to think that as we're sitting in this pandemic, right? Because we all saw this coming clearly. And so each of us, we have assumptions predictions of what is going to happen throughout our day-to-day lives, and we know that it's, maybe everything doesn't go exactly as planned, but it'll probably happen within a general idea of what I expect to happen. And so I'm comfortable in that, so I can deal with that. But the reality is none of us know what's going to happen to us on a day-to-day basis. And so we're constantly just responding and reacting to whatever is happening to us. Therefore, you're improvising, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're not operating from a script. You might be operating from assumptions, but not a script. So in improv, so they've just turned that into, okay, what makes improvisation possible? And it's those two words, it's yes and. Yes is accepting whatever idea is shared on stage as real, as true. So as improvisers, and you and I are going to improvise later, right, Charlie?
I hope so. Yes. I mean, as
Okay.
much
All right.
anxiety as that provokes in me, as you
Yes.
know,
Good. I want
but
you to
we're
be as anxious
definitely
as
going to.
possible.
Yes, for sure. We're going to.
So we'll do that later. But if you and I are performing on stage, the lights go down. Maybe we take a suggestion from the audience, and we'll take the suggestion of Western. Great. Okay. The lights go down. The lights come up. I look at you. You look at me. I have no idea what you're thinking. You have no idea what I'm thinking. But you and I both know, whatever Charlie says to me, I'm going to say yes and to it. And whatever I say to Charlie, he is going to say yes and to it. So the lights come up. You look at me, Charlie, and you say, look, that woman is tied to that train track. I wasn't expecting that, but I'm going to say yes. So yes is me going, yes, I accept your idea. Yes is acceptance. I accept your idea as real. Because if I say no, or I disagree with you, it completely halts our scene. It just screeching. Because why would I say no? We're making it up on the spot. So there is no wrong answer. Another improv principle, right? There is no mistake. There is no wrong answer. So if I'm going to say yes, so I just say yes. And so yes is acceptance. It's agreement. The and is I'm listening to your idea and I'm going to build off of it, which is giving you an idea back. So yes, and there's an axe over there. We can cut her free. And you say, yes, and you're going to yes, and my new idea. You're going to say, yes, and we need to hurry. A train's coming. It's less than a mile away. And all I have to do is yes, and your new idea. Yes, and if we don't hurry, she's going to go splat, right? And so all we're doing is telling the story one yes, and at a time. Yes is acceptance, and is responding and building. Accept what is going on, respond to it, and build off of it to be in collaboration. So improvisation is this completely democratic, collaborative experience of working with someone else to tell a story, to create a story that's never been told before. And so as long as you and I adhere by those two words of yes and, we're always going to be on the same page. And you know that you can take a risk because I'm going to yes and you. And you know that you can't make a mistake because I'm going to yes and you. And so in improvisation, the best scenes, the best stories happen when an actor makes a mistake, makes a genuine mistake, and instead of going, what are you talking about, Charlie? That's not what that word means. The other actor yes ands them and turns their mistake into magic, into genius, into gold, because there are no mistakes. And so you end up the best scenes, and this is life too. The best scenes, the best things that happen in life often come from mistakes, or often come from something happening that we weren't expecting to happen. And we say yes and to it, and it opens up, it's a new portal to discovery, right? In improvisation, we say mistakes create portals of discovery. Why? Because no one was planning it. No one was intellectually, planning it. And so it's a new world that's never been explored before. And so that's where real discovery happens.
Wow. I mean, there's, and as I hear this, the two real kind of principles that come to mind is vulnerability and authenticity, and how in that experience and a bit of trust too. I mean, you're trusting that your partner on the stage is going to, adhere to kind of these parameters that are set, but you've got to be very vulnerable, and really it draws out some real authenticity, because as you're thinking on the spot, it's your true self that's being exposed there. I mean, is that accurate?
Oh, that's spot on. And I love what you say, a bit of trust. That would be a great improv group name, right? Welcome, a bit of trust, because it is extremely vulnerable, and it's extremely naked, because you're out there with nothing, right? This idea of you're out there with nothing. But if Charlie, if you're out there with me, we're both out there with nothing, but we've got each other. So as long as we adhere to yes and, we're going to be fine. So now we've got each other's backs, right? We don't need to know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
We just need to know, like, whatever happens next, we're going to yes and it. So that vulnerability and trust is huge. I've been performing with these two guys now for over 16 years. We rarely have time to get together to rehearse, but we'll do a show, and we'll do a 2-hour show. There's usually two of us. We'll do a 2-man 2-hour show, and for 2 hours, like, you got a little pressure of standing up there and being funny. And so you get on stage, and I look at my partner across from me. I'm like, man, this guy has my back. I trust him with my life up here on stage, and he feels the same way. So now I can be authentic. I can be vulnerable. I can take risks because I know he has my back. In fact, there's a mantra in improvisation, which is, my goal is to make my partner look brilliant.
Wow.
Right.
That's
And so,
empowering.
and
Yes.
what, and therefore, what is my partner's goal? My partner's goal is to make me look brilliant. So if you and I are doing a scene or a show, Charlie, the entire time my mindset is, what is Charlie doing and how can I make him look good? And Charlie, you're looking at Travis and going, what is Travis doing and how can I make him look good? So my engagement and my focus is on you and your needs. Your engagement and focus is on me and my needs. And all we're doing is building, listening, building, taking care of each other, taking care of each other, taking care of each other. And so now there's that total trust and safety. We are safe in that environment because we're taking care of one another.
and
And
and,
so,
and it speaks to the energy, I'm sure, of how, I mean, what I'm drawn to is, today, especially in the world of social pressures where people are comparing
yeah,
themselves so much to other people, or
yeah,
jealousy and envy and all of these things that are coming out, and hearing what you're talking about. I've always kind of lived by this mantra of, we don't make our candle any brighter by blowing someone else's candle out. Our candle is our candle. In fact, when we focus on someone else's candle or the energy to blow it out, we're actually losing the energy that we have, that we can apply to our own lives. And so when you're building when your focus is truly on engagement and seeing what you can do to be of service, or make your other partner better, the energy, I'm sure, takes on all of that, the presence of all of that, call it positivity,
yeah.
or collaboration. Wow.
Absolutely. And we all know when you're in a relationship, where you're in a relationship in your life that's built around trust and safety, how good that feels. And in fact, each of us, you can probably count on one hand the number of relationships in your life where you feel completely safe to be authentically vulnerable, right? And and so the more we focus on creating those relationships, the more safety, the more fulfillment we have in our life. And so much of my work, Charlie, is taking those ideas of yes and, of collaboration, of connection, of building a safe relationship on stage, and saying, like, how is that any different than my marriage? How is that any different than my friendships? Why is it different in the corporate workplace where I work? And how is that different in the world of sports? Right? I guarantee the most successful sports teams have teammates that are trying to make their other teammates look good.
For sure.
Right.
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
and and to work in an environment where you have coworkers and managers and CEOs and bosses that are trying to take care of one another and make each other look good. Why do those companies perform so well? I mean, it's like, duh, it's not rocket science, right? When people take care of people, you're going to perform at a higher level. That's that idea of psychological safety, right? It's such a fancy word, psychological safety, but all psychological safety is environment or relationships of trust, respect, and value. When I feel trusted, respected, and value, it gives me permission to be authentic. We only show up authentically, Charlie, when we feel safe. If I don't feel safe, I'm not going to be authentic because that's vulnerable. But when I feel safe, now I can be authentic. And now we can actually create meaningful relationships, because you can't create a meaningful relationship until someone's being authentic. So it's this cyclical thing, and that's what unleashes true, high performance, is people, allowing their vulnerabilities to be on the table, their fallibilities to be on the table, their blind spots to be revealed and exposed. Why? Because the people you're doing it with genuinely care about you and they have your back. And that's what you have on stage when improv is being done well. But that's what you have in the most meaningful relationships in your life, is people who have your back, which gives you the safety to be yourself.
Yeah, it's amazing. And that, I think I was recently looking at an article on culture, team culture and collaboration and the power of working as a team. And I looked at this study that was done about the old plow horses and how much weight one plow horse could pull, you know, about 300 pounds or 400 pounds. And then you put another plow horse next to it and it's not 600 pounds. It's 800 pounds the first couple of days they work together. And by a week, they can almost triple the amount of weight that they can pull just by the energy that's brought together by the two of them together. I've done a little bit of, I won't say competitive running, but even in a 5K, when I'm running by myself, I have one time, but you put me in that group of people, the energy of the whole group,
Yeah,
the signs,
yeah.
the music, but the starting line, and you can, I didn't do anything different. My legs didn't get any stronger. It's just that human connection and that energy and the environment of collaboration really allows us to perform at a higher level, which is kind of it's exactly what you just described.
Yeah, and by the way, I love the horse story. It's such a powerful story. It really is. And I think what it exposes again is we are, we've evolved from millions of years. We're community, right? We're community creatures, right? We thrive in community settings, and we thrive, you know, by taking care of one another. And so, and you can see it, you can feel it. The more separated, the more splintered, the more isolated you become, the less you feel you belong, right? And how much of our value is tied to the sense of feeling valued and feeling like you belong. And when we find ourselves in community with others who genuinely care about us and we care about them, you see that, to your point, um, uh, the multiplied force that has in performance and happiness, fulfillment, everything across the board.
That's why I always encourage, and I'd say to a person, of all the men and women that have come on and talked about their journey overcoming obstacles in their lives, to a person, all of them have talked about the importance of finding a community to reach out and ask for help,
Yeah.
finding a community of people they identify with, that will just, even when they're tired, that will keep reaching their hand out. And I think we've dug into that here and shown how live yes and applies to that, and how improv has led you to teach that to teams and corporations and individuals. And I'm in long-term recovery, as you know, and have had some violent childhood and overcome childhood trauma. And we both follow, and you in the sports performance world, look at a lot of different theories that have helped athletes be propelled. And, in recovery, one of the things we learned very early on is the serenity prayer, which is simply,
Yeah.
God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. In sports, we've heard the theory, that Trevor's made famous in his book, around neutral thinking.
Yeah.
But in my opinion, neutral thinking and the serenity prayer, whether it's recovery or sports performance or even in the corporate world, can really be boiled down to live yes and, because yes and is simply accepting the reality without judgment of what's occurred
Yeah.
in my life and deciding what I'm going to do next. And I think, as we get into this next segment, and really build on that philosophy, you really are, in my opinion, kind of a master of understanding what we control and what we don't control, and really
Mhm.
looking at, yes, what's happened, good, bad, or indifferent. We don't deny it. I
Yeah.
think that's,
Yeah.
I think that's one of the hangups with positivity, is it
Yeah.
implies something's good for us. And it's like, it's not good to be in a pandemic, but yes, we're in a pandemic, and the empowerment comes from the choice I get to make. Am I going to still get up and go for a walk? Am I going to still get up and call my friends? Am I going to still get up and eat right? And really is empowering for us. And so, can you talk a little bit about, I know I unpacked a little bit there with the serenity
No,
prayer and with
it's good.
sports, but it really is, yes and is really embodiment for me of both of those things. And it's simply put.
Yeah, I mean, Charlie, you nailed it, right? And so when I talk about yes and, I can talk about it in a team environment, in a corporate environment, relationships, and really from as a collaborative tool. But for me, to your point, I just call it like yes and 3.0 is as a spiritual foundation, right? The reason I call it live yes and is because really truly, my wife and I and our family, we've been trying to live yes and if I when I look at every aspect of life, I'm like, that's it, right? It's just not what is happening, but just can you live yes and in this moment? And to your point, right? Yes, with that serenity prayer, it's acceptance, right? Acceptance of what is. You've heard me say this before, but I believe that yes and is radical collaboration with reality.
Ah,
To yes and is to be in radical collaboration with reality. So what is that radical collaboration? Well, yes, this is happening. Like you said, you don't have to bring any judgment to it. We're going to bring judgment to it because we're humans, we're judgment machines. That's what we do, and that's fine. But whatever is happening to you has no value until until you bring your value to it. Like my blue wall here, right in my office, like I like blue. Blue's one of my favorite colors. So I look at the wall and I'm like, I really like blue. But if you're sitting on the other side, Charlie, and you're like, you know what, blue, I hate blue. It's my least favorite color. You're looking at the wall, you're like, that's an ugly wall, Travis says, or I don't like blue. Well, what's truth? We talk about truth. What is truth? Truth is it's just a blue wall. There's no value to it until you bring your lens to it and I bring my lens to it, my perspectives, my beliefs, and then we just then let it impact us internally because we've brought our judgment to it. But life is simply just happening. Whatever is happening to us, it has no value until we judge it. And so the yes part is just the acceptance that whatever is happening, good or bad, that is what is happening. Rumi says, say yes quickly, right? So if we can just say yes quickly, even before we judge it, yeah, this is what's happening. Yes, I just lost my job. And now my ego can catch up and go, this is horrible, we're screwed, right? Or it can say, this is awesome, I wanted to leave this job forever. Like whatever it is, but the fact is, you've lost your job, or I've just been diagnosed with an illness, or wow, we're in a global pandemic. It just is what is happening. Yes, but we also know that we can spend so much time, we can spend a lifetime being in denial of what is happening or what has happened. And in denial, it's holding you back from moving forward. But that yes is yes, this is what's happening. Boom, now we're in collaboration with facts, with reality. And the and is where you have power.
yeah, that's
But
right.
don't mistake power with control, but it's where you have power. It's where you have influence in your power. The and response is you choosing, focus on choosing, you choosing how you're going to respond to it. Not what the outcome's going to be, how you're going to respond to it. And so if I'm really clear, Charlie, on who I am and what I'm about, you can call it your why, you can call it your purpose, you can call it your reason for being. The more clarity I have around who I am and what I'm about, I say yes to whatever is happening to me, because you can never control what happens to you 100% of the time, ever. But I always 100% of the time get to control how I respond. And so when I put all of my energy into my yes and response, that's where I have power. And as that response is connected to my why or my purpose, I'm going to have peace around how I respond. Again, not being able to control an outcome. And to your point about like positivity and so when I talk about positivity, I was like, hey, like being positive doesn't mean that the outcome is going to be better. It just means you're going to feel better about the outcome.
Well
and,
said.
and so, well, what I look at it from a realistic standpoint, I'm like, if I ask the audience right now, I'm like, hey, if I asked you to think negatively about a situation and I asked you to think positively about a situation, neither one of those changes or dictates the outcome. But if I said, which one feels better? like physically feels better in your body, to think positively about something or to think negatively about something? Most people are going to say, well, it feels better to be positive. So like, be positive. We know that that's not creating the outcome, but man, if I could choose between feeling good or feeling bad, and I choose to feel good, while I continue to accept what is happening and choose how I'm going to problem solve the best possible solution, if I happen to be positive, I'm going to feel better about how I feel. And so for me, it's like, hey, just make hey, which feels better to you? Yeah, go with that. But when it comes to having an impact or an influence, that yes is acceptance, that and is choosing a response that is most in alignment with who you really are. And then yes and then yes and then yes and.
So let's first, I think, because what you described, that choice of how I want to react emotes a feeling in us, and that feeling can carry with us, right? I mean,
Yeah.
what we think about expands, and so if we focus on the negative is really going to expand inside of us. So I thought maybe we'd give everybody a real life example to help them, that's probably happened to all of us, and maybe you can walk us through how yes and can help us, and then I want to talk about the importance of value. So everybody on the freeways here in California, and I'm sure probably in Florida, or especially in Boston, God, my goodness, I grew up on the East Coast, so I know about Boston, has experienced that situation with getting cut off. The rush driver needs to get off the freeway. You're on your way to work, you get cut off, and we know where road rage has led us. And so let's
Yeah.
just break
Yeah.
yes and down into a normal morning of a leisurely drive to work, and all of a sudden, the other car comes and cuts us off, and now we've got an opportunity to practice yes and. So I'm going to let you walk us through how that would serve us and in the best possible way.
Yeah. So I'm down here in South Florida. We have I-95 that runs, all the way up to the Northeast.
You bet.
The further south you get on 95 in Florida, and closer to Miami, like I-95 is a speedway, and it is a speedway where you do not adhere to pass on the left, get over on the right. So it is like, it's a whole lot of weaving. And so I teach my kids, right? My kids are all getting to that driving age. I'm like, your head here, you got to be checking mirrors, heads on a swivel. Don't assume that so like, my wife is like, relax, 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 right? I'm like, I know, but they got to know. And so whenever I'm on the highway here, like, I'm on my toes. And to your point, yeah, like, I'm getting cut off all the time from the extent that it's scary, and what happens, right? So most people jump to, our reaction was anger. But if we know there's a root to anger, anger is actually the secondary emotion. The initial emotion was fear.
Mm-hmm.
The initial emotion that sparks the anger is fear. I feared for my life, or I feared for someone else's life. And as a result of that, I got angry. So that road rage is really grounded in fear. So if we can actually address the fear and not the anger, we're going to be in better shape. So that guy cuts me off on the road, like, oh my gosh, I could have died. Now I'm furious. And so if we're unconscious, Charlie, we know this, if we're unconscious and we allow ourselves to, if we allow our emotions to take over, we're going to have road rage. And we just had a horrific situation down here with another driver shot another driver over a simple fender bender. Road rage, a crazy thing. And I'm sure once they ask him, what were you thinking? He'll say, I wasn't thinking anything. I was just seeing red. I was furious, right? And so we want to bring that sense of yes and opportunity to a situation. So someone cuts us off. Yes, they cut us off. Woo, right? Glad I'm okay. And now the and is where we get to choose our response. So we remember Viktor Frankl talks about there is a space between stimulus and response,
That's
right?
right. Yes.
If we just allow our emotions to run us, then it's stimulus response, right? That's why you lash out. Stimulus response, there's no space. So what we want to cultivate is a gap between stimulus and then response. Bigger the gap, the better. But even if we have a gap, inside the gap is where we get to choose our response. So that's why there wants to be a gap. So the guy cuts me off on the road. I'm noticing my anger. Instead of just reacting from that emotion, can I take a breath? Can I pause for a second, even if for a split second? Can I pause, take a breath, and ask, how do I really want to respond that is the best expression of me? Right? Living your, so we have to know what the best expression of you looks like. You have to know who you are so that you can respond accordingly. And if I can, in that moment of reflection, I can pause and say, thank God he didn't hit me. Thank God he didn't hit someone else. I wonder what's going on in his or her world right now that's causing this, right? And now I can even go so far to say, I'm going to pray for them right now with whatever they're going through in their life. I'm going to pray for the other people that are on the road and pray for them to find a sense of peace, because clearly this is not a state of mind that someone wants to be in. And now I can choose my response of, ooh, I'm just going to, get my wits about me to make sure I don't injure anybody else. So, but it's in that space. It's in that space where, yes, this has just happened. I'm feeling those emotions. Those emotions are natural, but I am not my emotions. So I'm now going to choose my response based on what happened. And if we can cultivate that space in the middle, it's going to make all the difference in the world. And that opportunity is given to us in less dramatic ways throughout our entire day, from the people that we love, how they're treating us, to just the weather outside, to all of these different things. Yes, it's raining outside and there's a wedding. Oh, yes, it is. And wow, okay, what can we do to still make this a magical experience? And so when we stay in that proactive, yes, this is happening, can't change that. And what can I do though? Because I know who I am, and I can respond in a way that's still going um, to be the best representation of myself. And last thing I'll say on that, Charlie, is I think when we're really clear on the impact we want to have on other people, again, we can't control that, but I know that whenever I have an interaction with somebody, I want them to leave the interaction feeling better about themselves. And so I'm really conscious of any interaction I have with someone and they walk away and I go, ooh, I'm not sure the way I was speaking to them, they're walking away feeling better about themselves. Or I was so not present in that interaction that they're walking away with a pretty indifferent reaction. I'm like, oh, I don't want to be about indifference. I want to be about making people feel better about themselves. And when we're clear about the impact we want to have on others, that gives us an intention about how we are showing up moment to moment to moment. And so cutting a guy off on the road who just cut me off doesn't really reflect the impact I want to have on other people.
Wow. I mean, I literally, I felt my own physiological reaction to the guy cutting me off as you described it. And then I actually found myself getting more relaxed as you talked about, that space between stimulus and response, and then how I could respond. And I can imagine, all of us can imagine that really can carry us through the whole day. I mean, if you have that lens of he disrespected me, that, he put me at risk, and all of a sudden you go to work and your coworker says, hey, did you get that report done? Or they're supposed to give you a report and they didn't get it done. He's disrespecting. Now the whole world's disrespecting
Yeah,
me. And
proof.
yeah, exactly. That confirmation bias. And, I'm so lucky and blessed to have people like you, and it's so funny to hear you and George Mumford speak the same words in different ways about that. He calls it the eye of the hurricane, that space
Yeah,
between stimulus and response. And I know
yeah,
you guys have shared a stage and inspired young people before, and that same kind of ability to get from that amygdala, that kind of adrenaline and cortisol rushing through our
yep.
body, to that breath. He talks about that awareness of breath, and you just help people understand, if you can, even just for a split second, you literally can change your whole day with, yes, that guy cut me off, and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
get to I get to decide how I want to respond to him, and it can change your whole day.
Yeah, and I love George talking about the eye of the hurricane, and living in South Florida and having lived through about a half dozen of them now. there is there is this really crazy peaceful beauty in the middle of the eye of a hurricane. It's crazy because the hurricane moves in and you just get slammed, right? You are just you're bunkered down, you're getting slammed, and then that, oh my God, all of a sudden things get super quiet outside and there's no wind and there's no noise. And everyone goes outside and everyone's seeing your neighbors. Hey, you guys okay? You okay? How's your power? Everything okay? And there's total peace. But if you pull out and look at the storm, you've got this enormous raging storm. But right in the middle, you've got total peace and safety and clarity. And what I love about that analogy is if we can stay on our toes and continue to move, we have to adjust because the storm is moving. We've got to move with it in order to stay in the middle, to stay in that eye.
Ah, that's such, oh, that is powerful. And that is exactly right. That is how we can actually stay there. And, there's a few other things in that lesson that you just gave us. And I think one of them is the importance of values. When I tell my story, there was a period of my life where I didn't live by a set of values. I had learned a lot of unhealthy behaviors. I was engaged in unhealthy behaviors as a result of my addiction and my alcoholism. And really the turning point in my life was when I got really intentional about identifying the values I wanted to live by and ingraining those into, my subconscious, so that in those situations, as you just talked about, I know what I stand for. I know what hope looks like. I know what
Yeah.
perseverance looks like. I know what humility looks like. And those have been really important. And I don't think enough of us have been taught to really understand who we are. We spend this kind
Yeah.
of existence kind of just waking up and going from thing to thing and saying, how do I really want to show up? And what really is important to me? What do I
Yeah.
stand for? And what are
Yeah.
the rules around those values? So thank you for sharing the importance of how do I want to show up in the world, and what do I hold true as values?
Yeah. Well, yeah. What I love about that, Charlie, is we can make it as simple as possible because all of us can think about the people who are most important in our lives, right? We can see them, we can feel them right now as we think about them. And then we ask ourselves, what impact do I want to have on these people, right? I want them, how do I want my kids to feel loved by me? How do I want my wife to feel loved by me? How do I want my friends? And now, I mean, those are very specific values that come back to you, right? I want them to feel seen. I want them to feel that I totally unconditionally accept them for who they are. I want them to feel totally supported. So all of these values come back. You're like, yeah, that's how I want them to feel. And then it becomes very practical. What behavior do I need to do in order to have that impact? And that's it, right? Like if I want someone to feel supported, now I need to ask myself, what am I what am I doing today to make them feel supported? Or what have I done today to make them feel supported? Just like if I'm an athlete and I'm like, I want to run a marathon, I have to go, okay, what behavior did I do today that would allow me to run a marathon? And so if we can take values, right, just like when a company, when an organization creates values, and even this is a big part of what I do now, Charlie, is all right, take your values and values are just an idea until you turn them into behavior, right? Until we take a value and actually turn it into behavior, it's just an abstract thing. And so you and I, before we recorded, we were talking about all the bracelets and stuff that I'm wearing and you're wearing and what habit you're working on and what habit I'm working on. And it's like, yeah. So as we create routines and habits, our routines and our habits, the point of them is that they're reinforcing behavior. That's why we do them. So right, I'm like on day, what is it, 88 or of my yoga
That's right.
routine. And the yoga routine didn't come out of like, oh, I want to be this extremely woke individual who can says I do yoga. No, it's because I was noticing during the pandemic that I was physically stiff and feeling rigid, and also knowing the value of yoga and breath work and presence, and knowing that that is behavior that I want to have consistently throughout the day. So if I give myself a yoga routine, that is going to create better behavior. So the routine leads to the behavior. And so it's just a really practical approach to it. And so when we're able to whittle our days away to what activities do I do consistently, and what behaviors do those activities reinforce, and then we can start to look a little bit more critically at what we do and go, okay, that activity on its own, it's neither good or bad, but that activity reinforces this behavior, which is not or is in alignment with who I ultimately am aspiring to be.
Yeah, it's on the back of the note cards I send out. Is the one of the principles I created for myself is simply is what I want in my life consistent with what I do in my life, you know. And to your
Perfect.
point, I use that example. I mean, I was just at the gym the other day, and my coach was talking to me about golf, and he asked how I was playing, what my handicap was, and I said I'm an 18 not I'm an 18.2, but I really want to be a 15. And then I had to stop myself and say that's not actually accurate. I don't want to be. If I wanted to be a 15, then I'd go to the driving range once a week and I'd go putt. And I don't do either of those things. So I guess I really am very comfortable being an 18.2, and that's just
Yeah.
the truth. And when I
Yeah.
decide I want to get something different, then I'll do something different. But I can't get caught in this kind of mind game of my intentions are going to actually get me there. I've got to match my intentions with my actions, and that's how you
Yeah.
get lasting change in your life. So thank you for reinforcing that. It's really important for me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I think, you know, as I've got two things I want to cover, because I want to talk about how Live Yes and can help people get unstuck. But before that, I want to cross the line of being uncomfortable and do a little improv and show people what yes and is. And so I'm going to ask you to kind of just set me up and then lead me through a few minutes of improv, and I'll
Yeah.
and people can feel free to try this. You can try this at home. You
You
don't
can
need.
try, yes, in the safety of your own home. You can try it in your car on a road trip. Tell the kids, hey, put your screens away for a few minutes.
Oh,
Um,
I love it.
and so yeah, so we'll do a little yes and 101. And really,
Okay.
again, I call it yes and 101, but this is what improvisation is. And so you and I are going to tell a story, Charlie. We're going to tell it one idea at a time. So yes and yes and yes and so uh, the scenario will be you and I have some sort of plans this weekend. We'll find out what those plans are, and so we're going to talk about the weekend. And whatever idea you say to me, I'm going to say yes, accept it, and build off of the idea you gave me. And then you're going to build off of the new idea I gave you by saying yes and yes and so the story could go any crazy way, which is what improvisation is all about. And that's what happens when you open yourself up to the possibility and collaboration of yes and. And so I'll give you the first opening statement, and then we'll yes and from there.
All right. I'm ready.
Awesome. Oh man, Charlie, whew, I got some great sleep last night because I am so excited about our weekend plans.
Yes, and I've been looking forward to getting together for so long. The pandemic has kept us apart, and now things are opening up, and I'm excited about seeing you.
Yes, and I am so pumped that you rented that Winnebago so we can take that road trip.
Yes, and it's got room for about 4 or 5 other people, so I'm hoping both of our families can come along.
Yes, and my wife and kids are coming, and we're even bringing our dog, who is really excited about the trip as well.
Yes, and he should really get along with our cat Cloud. Cloud is it loves dogs, and it'll be fun to have them both together.
Yes, that should be quite the scene inside the Winnebago with the animals running after one another. And My plan was to stop during the trip and adopt adopt a rescue dog.
Yes, those dogs are in need of homes, and we'll probably end up getting one as well.
Yes, and I know that you and I are using this trip as a way to raise money for dog shelters all over the country.
Yes, and that little shelter in South Florida that had that little Yorkie is really in need of supplies. So I'm looking forward to directing some of our attention down to them.
Yes, and that's where we're going to finish our trip, and we're going to have this giant fundraiser for Corky the Yorkie, and we're going to try to raise as much money for this shelter.
Yes, and we'll have plenty of dog food and plenty of doggy bags for all of these dogs. And it's amazing that a little trip in a Winnebago can turn into a huge fundraiser for Corky the Yorkie.
Yes, and Tua Tagovailoa, the Miami Dolphins quarterback, is going to be there because he has half a dozen Yorkies.
Oh boy. Well,
Okay, we'll end it right there.
ladies and gentlemen, that is yes and where Travis and I started on a small Winnebago trip and ended up with a Miami Dolphins sponsored fundraising event for
Corky the
Corky the
Yorkie.
Yorkie.
Yes, Corky the Yorkie.
And I have to tell you, if you've not been energized, and a little nervous, you definitely want to try a little improv. That was awesome, Travis. Thank you so much.
No. Well, what I love about that, Charlie, is again, I mean, it's when I get to do this in team environments and corporate environments, and even the stiffest of environments, or even the most like professional of environments, like working with professional athletes or working with, like these, high level, financial planners. When you put them into a yes and, like, everyone turns into kids. Like, you just turn it, you're giggling because of like the silliness that comes out of having to say yes and there is a physical healthy reaction we have in our bodies when you say yes, right?
No doubt I feel better.
It's open, right? The universal yes of accomplishment is hands up. Yes, you cross the finish line. Yes, you get to the top of the mountain, you put your hands up in the Y pose, right? It's yes. And we also know the blockage that we feel when we're in a no mindset, when we're like no, we actually get, we hunker down. No, yes is open, no is closed. So it's a good way to think about, so how we are approaching other people. Are we in a, not in a literal sense, but are we in an open mindset with the people that we're working with? Are we in a closed mindset with the events that are happening to us? Are we open to them? Not having, like I say all the time, Charlie, you don't have to like what is happening to you, but you have to say yes and to it. And that's where the freedom is. So like, even saying yes and to a crummy situation, like the yes, you kind of like, it almost shifts your emotional state to be open to, and now we can problem solve it.
Yeah, and that's
Now we can deal with it instead of running away from it.
Yeah, and I think that's, a perfect segue, because really getting into the solution. And, I know the title of your book is 3 words to get unstuck: live, yes, and, given the nature of our audience and the inspiration that and the hope we're giving people. And I'd just love you to talk a little bit about, and then share how people can follow you and find you, because, you've inspired me and so many. Can you talk a little bit about how live, yes, and can help people really get unstuck with some of the challenges they face in their life, before we wrap up, Travis?
Yeah, that's a great way to finish, Charlie. Again, 3 words for getting unstuck: live, yes, and just like Charlie and I told a story, neither one of us were thinking we're going to manipulate the story into being a quirky Yorkie, shelter story, right? It was building off of the next idea, yes, and. And so this idea of being stuck, right? If you're a human, you have been stuck, or you're currently stuck, or you're stuck in some aspect of your life. That's what makes you human. So we don't need to beat ourselves up for being stuck. It means you're human. But I think one of the reasons that people feel stuck is because the journey out of that stuckness feels too daunting.
Hmm.
Right? It's
Yep.
just too big, right? How do I? And so what we project, it's like running that marathon, right? If I'm running mile 1 thinking about mile 26, that mental fatigue is just going to shut me down. But if I'm running mile 1 and I'm just thinking, run mile 1, and then run mile 2, and then run mile 3. So we're staying in this mindset of the only thing I can handle is what is happening right now. So to get unstuck, it doesn't have to be, okay, I need to achieve my final destination. I know where I want to go or what improvement I need to make. What can I do right now to take a step in that direction? Literally, what do I have in front of me that I can say yes and to, right? Can I call a friend? Can I literally physically get up off the couch? If I'm noticing that, like, I am so out of shape and I am so not fit and I want to get fit, but man, I have so long to go. If we focus on how far we have to go, we're never going to get there. But if I said to someone, hey, can you get up today and go for a walk around your neighborhood? They'll be like, of course I can go for a walk around my neighborhood. Awesome. Let's do that. Let's have that be our starting point. And then tomorrow, how do you feel tomorrow? Can you do 2 blocks around your neighborhood? Yeah, I can do 2 blocks around it. Good. Travis, I can do 5 blocks. 5. Don't worry about that. Let's start with 1. So you and I, just like we're talking about these little mini habits that we have, if we can take a big change and break it down to little mini tweaks that we can make today, now we've created momentum, right? We want to set goals for ourselves that are so achievable that we can't not do them. Because once we achieve that goal, we're just gonna bump it up a little bit, and then bump it up a little bit, and then bump it up a little, and before you know it, we're down that road, and the destination or the goal doesn't seem as overwhelming. But then we just bring our attention back to where am I today, and what can I do today? Win the day, kind of the theme for our national team right now. It's all about win the day, right? What can I do today? What can I do today? And then even granular, win this moment. What can I do right now to win this moment? The guy that just cut you off on the highway, let's win this moment. Let's win this moment for ourselves so that we can then win the rest of the day. And so if we can just simplify things, which is why yes and is happening in the present moment. Yes, and what can I do now? And it brings us back to what can I do now? Well, hey, I'm going to do 5 push-ups. I haven't done push-ups in months. Like, I'm going to do 5 push-ups today. Great, man! I did 5 push-ups today. That's 5 more than I've done in the last 6 months. Tomorrow, maybe I'll do 6. Maybe I'll do 10,
or just 5 again.
Or just 5 again, or 4 tomorrow, because that's what I'm capable of tomorrow. So we've got to stop beating ourselves up for where we are, and be in acceptance, yes, of where we are, and realize that where we are is not where we've always been, and where we are is not going to be where we're always going to be. It's just where you are right now. So how are you able to collaborate with where you are right now, knowing that you aspire to be better? Great. Well, let's just win today. Let's win this moment.
And our minds love, I love the way our minds work, I should say, because, when we build discipline, little bits of discipline, our minds really do get attached to either failure or success. And so if I see myself as a guy who does a push-up every day, I'm doing push-ups every day. If I see myself as a person who avoids doing push-ups every day, then I continue to avoid doing push-ups every day. So thank you for explaining to us how the principle of live, yes, and can help us get unstuck. And thank you for all of the wisdom and for sharing your personality, your hope, and your inspiration, and your teachings with us today. And I know people are going to want to follow you more, and we'll obviously tag all of your profiles on the episode. But can you just maybe share a little bit with people about where they can find you, find your book, and how they can follow you?
Yeah, thanks. So my book is 3 words for getting unstuck. Live, yes, and. It's on Amazon in paperback as well as Kindle for you Kindle readers out there. On social media, everywhere, probably under @live, yes, and, LIVE, yes, and. And my website is liveyesand.com. And so, Charlie, the other thing I want to put out there to your audience, and I'm an improviser, so I'm always trying things.
Yes, you are.
I'm all about engagement and connection. I love connecting with people. And I just did a series of talks for a group a few weeks ago. And at the end, I was like, hey, I'm going to give you guys a little yes and challenge. And I told them to email me every day. Just email me a quick example of how they said yes and to a situation in their day, right? How did you say yes and to it? How did you accept it? And how did you respond to it? And I said, do that for 10 days. And after 10 days, I'll drop a book in the mail to you for completing this yes and challenge. And there was probably 100 people between the 2 events, and 10 people took me up on it. Right.
Oh,
so
great.
every day I got this little gift in my inbox. Hey, Travis, and I don't need to know all the juicy details. We could be like, hey, my kid was throwing a fit. Instead of getting frustrated, I sat with him and let the storm pass. And then I gave him a hug and we moved on. Perfect. Boom. Yes, and done. Guy cut me off on the road. Instead of losing my mind, I took a deep breath. Boom. Awesome. Yes, and. And so it's just a little yes, and challenge to get ourselves to create a little bit of a habit or a way of getting used to saying yes and more often. So I put that out there, Charlie, to all of your listeners. My email address is Travis L. Thomas, my middle initial L, Travis L. Thomas @mac.com. So I invite you all to take the 10-day yes and challenge. And again, my contact information is on my website and all of that. So more than happy to extend that to everybody.
and we'll link it, and that's exciting, and I'll take you up on that. And after this episode drops, we'll get some people to embrace the reality of their lives and the power that comes with the choice they make to do something different. So, again, Travis, hopefully you understand how much you mean to me, and how much your friendship has meant to me. And so now for the big reveal on episode Overcome Out Loud with Travis Thomas, and everybody knows I'm very transparent with my vulnerability. So we'll now let you know that last week Travis and I recorded an episode of Overcome Out Loud. And I, in all of my wisdom, forgot to hit record. So I had to let Travis know that it was one of the most inspiring episodes, and I wanted to do it again. So, so this was take 2 of Travis and Charlie. And as I left the house, my lovely Nina said, "Love you," and hit record. So
Yes.
we had a great morning and an afternoon for you. And brother, thank you so much. And I look forward to participating in the Live Yes and Challenge. And thank you for all you do for so many people.
Thank you, Charlie. And again, there are no mistakes. So whatever happened last week, and this is the recording that was needed. That's why it happened. So there are no mistakes. No, Charlie, just a pleasure to be here, and everything that you're doing personally, and everything that you're doing with Overcome Out Loud. You're living your yes and, or you're living your yes. I call yes your excellent self. So keep living your yes,
I
brother.
will, sir. Thank you so much, Travis. Have a great
Awesome.
rest of your day.
You too.